welcome to Artistic Adventures. This is part 5 of our Chinese doll project, and we're going to be working on her shoes today. And as soon as I hit traditional Chinese shoes in the Google bar, I knew a little history would be involved. So I found some interesting shoes from Chinese history and maybe even some modern history. A lot of beautiful embroidery. Maybe you recognize this type. These were even some clogs, wooden clogs, and even those opera dolls we saw wore the wooden clogs. And then we come to foot binding. These are shoes worn by women who had their foot bound from a young age, and it made their feet very, very tiny, like 5 inches long, and wore these shoes. And these were usually women in the nobility. And here you see a woman who had her foot bound. These are now called lotus feet because of the way they look. And of course, it made them very difficult for them to walk. After that, these shoes came out and they were called horse foot shoes or Chinese dancing shoes. They're even sold today, and they were sort of to mimic the foot binding. Of course, we don't like foot binding because it's a bad thing for women to have their foot bound and not be able to walk around. So we're not going to be doing anything like that. But anyway, we're going to start with these with these Monster High doll shoes that I took off of the Dracula that I'm working on. And I thought instead of making a whole new pair of shoes, I would just sort of remake these, which will give you guys another technique to use. You don't always have to make shoes from the beginning if you have a pair, although a lot of my used Monster Highs don't come with shoes. So anyway, I'm just starting by taking an X-Acto knife very carefully and getting rid of all the raised decorations. So I just have a flat uh, surface to work on because I'm going to paint them. And I did want to, these shoes actually are in two parts. So in a minute, I'm going to pull the platform part off of the shoe and you'll see then what we're going to use for our modified Chinese style shoe. But I am going to save those wedge heels and make a model out of them so that I mean a mold so I can use them on my other shoes. I already have the sole mold, so this I could use if I wanted to do a wedge heel shoe. And you know, wearing these high heel shoes this high is probably pretty bad for your feet too, just like bonding. But this is what we got to work with, so we're going to go with it. So anyway, I've pulled the wedge part off of that shoe, and now we just have this sort of interesting, sort of modern look that sort of, I don't know, in some way reminded me of that horse hoof shoe or the dancing shoe. It had, you know, that strange wooden thing you had to balance on. Reminded me a little bit too of the wooden chunky shoes that the geisha women wear. It's sort of like, oh, maybe this odd thing on your feet makes you walk pretty or something. I don't know. But anyway, these will just be a sort of fantasy shoe. We certainly wouldn't think that any real woman would want to wear these. But the thing that I took away from my Chinese shoe search was beautiful embroidery, really beautiful embroidery. And right now I'm putting a coat of matte medium on these so I can paint them. That plastic that they're made out of, first of all, didn't sand very well and also wouldn't accept paint. So we're going to put some matte medium on and let that dry. And then we're going to start our painting project. This will be a challenge because I don't paint little tiny things very well. Anyway, I've got all my paints ready. And what I wanted to do was in some way mimic the flower design on that beautiful pink scarf that I used in the dress. So I'm starting with a pink base and I'm just putting down a coat of pink paint on the top part of all those shoes. I'm not putting it on the sole. And I ended up putting 2 coats of this on just to let you know. I'm not going to show that on camera and waste time, but I did put 2 coats of pink paint on and let them dry. And this is after they've dried, and we're going to start doing the design. So that little knob in the front, I'm painting gold, and then I want the flower surrounding that to resemble the purple chrysanthemum or lavender chrysanthemums that were on that scarf. And they had a darker petal and a lighter petal. So I'm putting both of those into this design around the gold knob. That'll be the purple chrysanthemum in the center. And I'm putting in a leaf and but it put some more of the flowers that I sort of am taking from the design of that scarf. There were purple flowers, orange flowers, um, some sort of, I don't know, maybe it was a blue, but maybe more of a purplish blue flower and yellow, and just some swirls and things like that. And the brushes that I'm using here are made for nail art. I have a link to them in my most frequently used supplies list that I usually post in the description box. You can look those up. They just have really nice little tiny brushes that are good for these sorts of things, and they're really cheap too. They're not the best quality, but they're cheap. So I'm just making, different little flower patterns on these shoes that remind me of that scarf. And once we finish doing this, I'll do the other shoe off camera so we don't have to take up time doing that. And then we're going to put some high gloss varnish on them to seal them. Oh, but first, before we do that, we have to paint the heel. And I'm not painting the heel on these because I want to paint them white. If you remember that one pair of shoes that we looked at in the beginning, the Chinese dancing shoes, they had that painted white chunky heel. So I'm going to paint the soles of these white to sort of mimic that. All right, so now we've got our little tiny flower designs painted on here to mimic embroidery and the designs from the scarf. And we'll let that dry, and then we'll come back later and we'll paint the heel. So this has been drying for a while, and now we're going to put a couple of coats of white paint on just to make sure that the pink underneath doesn't show through. And this is just acrylic paint, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but this is just acrylic paint. All right, so there we have our modified traditional Chinese shoe, and we're going to put a coat of gloss varnish on and seal the paint and protect it. We're using the Liquitex High Gloss Varnish as usual. And I am going to put 2 coats of paint on both shoes and let them dry, and then I'll show you how they look on the doll. How's that? So that was a nice quick video. Yay! After yesterday's dress video, which nearly wore me out. Woo, that was some project. But it turned out pretty good. So here is our doll wearing her new shoes. There's the front, and here's the other side. So you can see both sides and the design. They're not identical. The designs are not identical, but they're close. So that's it for our quasi-traditional modern Chinese shoes. And we still have some more work to do on this doll. We've got some hair ornaments to make, some other decorations, and we're going to do a final styling of her hair with a hair ornament, and then we'll be done. But for now, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.